محمد وآل محمد.
Yes, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure immaculate The theme is spiritual wayfaring, and in the last 3 nights we had to cover a few introductory concepts and principles before we actually start the actual process of wayfaring, what it is, how it is, and so on and so forth. But maybe 1 or 2 other sessions are required before we actually start the practical side of it. Today, or tonight rather, it's quite a tricky subject, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to provide an answer for it. But there are some concepts to share with you and for you to think about it. Because in the process of spiritual wayfaring, the subject is the I, the first person singular, not the physical I. So this, we have to know what we mean by the I. In one holy tradition, it reads, Rahimallahu Imra'an Arafa, may Allah grant mercy upon one who knows min aina, where he's from, wa ila aina, where he's going, wa li'ain, why he's here, what's it all for. But in the first clause, where one is from, that doesn't mean one's passport details or anything. It's a bit more deeper than that. What's the essence of me and you? What does our identity lie in? What's that inner reality of me or I? When you say I am jumping or I am eating, this I, what is it referring to? Maybe if we get an answer to this, we'll know where we've come from. Is it the physical body or not? Here sometimes one says, for example, I am studying, I am playing, or I am, let's say, 1.70 m, I am 80 odd kilograms, I am this, I am that. All these are good descriptions, but we want to know what the I is in all these sentences. These are just manifestations of that I. But what is that I we want to know? If someone says, well, I am the person standing in front of you. Okay, this person, is the I to be located in your clothes? You say no. These clothes can be taken off and thrown away, but I persist. Is it in your hair? You say, no, the hair can be cut, for example. Is it in your fingers, your hands? Where exactly is this to be located? Here, philosophers have always tried to find an answer to this. And in Western philosophy, it falls into the category of personal identity, this subject. And they say this person at 40 years of age, what is it that this 40-year-old has? And when that individual was 5 years of age, what's the constant that was always accompanying them? In order to find an answer to the I, in order to find an answer to the individuality of the person, the individual, they want to find out what is it, what's that constant. And some people think the answer's in the biological side. Some people believe it's in one's psychology, some people go to the brain, and some people speak of a spirit. And at the end, one is still confused as to what the I is. Now I want to go through a number of experiments. I did warn you last night that it's going to be quite medical. But it's only tonight which it has a medical touch. And after all, I did do medicine for 8 years. Naturally it will infiltrate and permeate through the readings and everything. Here, I want to go through a number of scenarios. Some of them real, some of them are rationally possible. They're not impossible. They are possible according to the facts that we have today. But some of the scenarios are real also. In none of these scenarios do I mention something which is rationally impossible, because that won't be of any benefit to us. But let's start with something we all know of, and that's the transplantation of organs. If I was to, let's say, transplant my kidneys, for example, after the operation, let's say, what's your name? I say, I'm Farouk. I haven't changed. The I is the same I. Then if you transplant one's lungs, for example, a liver transplant, one by one, go through different parts of the body, say, I am Farouk at the end of the operation. But when the brain is transplanted, so let's say I receive the brain of John, and my brain, for whatever reason, I have an accident and it goes, and then John's brain is put into my brainless cadaver, assuming, well, a brainless body rather, which has been kept alive, but it's brainless. You put John's brain now into the body, you say, what's your name? He says, I'm John. See, things are different now. I'm not saying that I is in the brain. For now it's following where the brain is going. With no other part of the body would this have happened. With the brain suddenly things begin to change. Now, when the Americans and the Russians were trying to go on the moon, and they wanted to send the first man on the moon, there was a race between them. At the same time, there was another race going on. And that was a race in relation to brain transplantation. And in the 50s, a Russian came and transplanted the head and the forelimbs of a 1-month puppy onto an adult, I forgot the dog's, it was I can't remember what kind of dog it was, but it was, oh yes, Siberian Husky, yes. So he transplanted the head and the forelimbs of a 1-month puppy onto this other dog, adult Siberian Husky, which was alive at the same time. They shared the same blood circulation, albeit artificially, but they managed to maintain that. Here, this is not a problem. Here we have 2 eyes. There's no problem here. And actually the puppy was always biting the ears of the adult dog. 2 different eyes, 2 different psychologies, but they were just sharing as if they were sharing the same body. 2 brains, 2 eyes. That's not to say the eye is in the brain or anything. I don't want to leave you with that impression yet. And then at the same time, 10 odd years later, this American came, and what he did was, imagine 2 monkeys, all of this has happened. It's been documented in a medical journal called Surgery, 1971. 2 monkeys, A and B, he decapitated monkey A, well, both their heads. And then the head of monkey A was transplanted. I'm using the word transplanted loosely here. The head, not the brain, the whole head, was put onto the body of decapitated monkey B. And monkey B, who has the head of monkey A, only lived for 8 minutes, and he was paralyzed from neck downwards because of the limited technology they had at the time. Before this transplantation arose, it's not a brain transplantation, it's a head transplantation, a cephalic transplantation here. That's different to a brain, but still the brain is being transferred. They taught monkey A, before decapitating it, a few tests. Then after putting the head of monkey A onto monkey B, in those 8 minutes they did see that this new entity is following the tests that monkey A once upon a time was taught. And the post-operative notes, they exist, it's been documented. But this suggests that after this transplantation, the eye goes where the brain goes, even though the body was of monkey B. But still, that eye is of what was monkey A once upon a time. Then the philosophers entered the scene and said, okay, now this is happening. It's not rationally impossible. Let's give a scenario and see where the eye lies if this scenario were to happen one day. Imagine that I have an accident and only my brain is kept alive. And then imagine that there's a clone of me, a brainless clone though. It looks just like me, but it's brainless, and you put my brain into that clone, which looks just like me. Then you say, what's your name? We expect that new entity will say, I'm Pharaoh. Nothing's different here, because it's my brain at the end of the day. You would expect it. Even though with the monkey example it has happened, we would expect it to happen with humans too. But here, the appearance also is like me. That's also, with twins and clones, these things happen. But then a twist was given to it by another philosopher who said, look, in children there's a phenomenon that has been documented to have occurred, and that's when children, the brain has two hemispheres, and there's a tube connecting the two, the corpus callosum. It conveys data from hemisphere to hemisphere. In children, they saw that when they have an accident and a considerable amount of trauma arises, now those two hemispheres, they have different functions. What happened was, before one hemisphere was to receive trauma, it sent all its data to the other hemisphere, and then with a single hemisphere, their child, after the accident, was doing the functions of two hemispheres, but although only one hemisphere was working. This has happened. Now what this philosopher has said is, imagine now I have an accident, and only my brain is kept alive, and there are two brainless clones of me now. Now we said it's possible for one hemisphere to do the work of two hemispheres. If we put one of my hemispheres into clone A and put another hemisphere into clone B, and then ask the two clones, what's your name? They both will say Pharaoh. Just think about that for now. We'll come back to it later. Now let's go to real medical examples. We're just trying to locate, for now, what follows the eye, or where the eye follows with these changes. That's what we're trying to do for now. The next few scenarios are scenarios that we see in the urology department usually. But before I go through them, 3 terms have to be clarified. One is sex, one is gender, and one is genetics. By sex we mean one's physical anatomy, a set of genitalia which determines whether you're male or female. Here, that's the criterion of the urologists. That's what they want to see. If it's this set of physical anatomy, it's male. If it's this set of physical anatomy, it's female. So sex, its criterion is physical. Gender also has a male and a female variation. That's to do with one's psychology, what your gender is. Depending on your psychology, if it's masculine in nature, you're male gender-wise. If the female side predominates, you're female gender-wise. Now usually those who are male sex-wise, they are male gender-wise. That's usually the case. But things can happen. But here the criterion is one's psychology. Then with genetics, the criterion is the chromosomes. So if it's XY, it's male, and that's all that the geneticist cares about. If it's XX, it's female. 3 important terms now. Now we're going to go through these scenarios. It's important to take this in mind. So imagine Peter. These are real cases now. Well, the first one is Sayr. Peter, male, and sex-wise, genetics-wise, he's male, but he has a very strong female psychology, and it's so strong that it's bothering him, that he wants to change his sex, trans-sex operations. So Peter, sex-wise, is male, genetics-wise is male, but gender-wise, Peter is female. There's nothing wrong with that either. It's not attack or anything. Here, Peter goes and has a trans-sex operation, excising certain parts, having a plastic of certain parts, with some hormonal therapy and so on and so forth. Then after the operation, Peter, who was male sex-wise before the operation, sex-wise becomes female after the operation. The gender remains the same, the genetics remains the same. He's male genetically, but the sex is female. So, what's your name? He'll still say Peter, because the brain is the same brain. He may change it to Jane to be more appropriate, but the I is the same I. So here we see that sex has no role in the identity of who we are. In relation to the essence of what we are, the I, sex is secondary. And that shows it, this scenario. Then we come to a case where, imagine now that instead of having that transsex operation, with the monkey example, let's say brain transplantations are rationally possible, even though they haven't occurred yet, and I don't think it will occur for a long time because they won't allow it. Imagine now Peter, instead of having that kind of an operation, now has a brain transplant, but he has his brain transplanted into a brainless female body that has been kept alive, for example. He doesn't have an operation with his own body, no. Only the brain is transplanted into a female body that has been kept alive, imagine, but it doesn't have a brain. So now the appearance is totally that of another woman. They say, what's your name? They'll still say Peter. But here, with this new individual, it looks new at least, not only is the sex female, the genetics is also female, because the brain has been transplanted into a female body, and the gender remains female as before. But the point is, most probably, Peter will say, that's me. There's no disruption in relation to the I. The I still persists. Another example is, imagine we have a man who has a male psychology, but due to a psychiatric problem, he has a problem with his body. This is relatively common in the psychiatric world. You see at least one case wherever you go. They have a problem with this body of theirs. Let's say if brain transplants become a possibility, a reality rather, one day. Let's say this person with male sex, male gender and male genetics, who has a difficulty with this body and keeps on wanting to destroy it, has a problem with it, wants a female body for whatever reason. And then the brain is transplanted into a female body. Here now you have an individual with a male gender still, but the sex and genetics differ. Now maybe the gender may differ over time, but most probably not, because hormone levels are a function of brain activity, glands in the brain, but still the I persists. There's no disruption. They relate. I was like that once upon a time, now after this, I'm like that. But here with this case, we see that even genetics doesn't play a role in relation to the I, the identity of the I. Because that I, which was male, had a male set of genetics, after the operation has a female set of genetics. But the I is the same. The genetics differs. The sex can differ. These are secondary. We want to know what the I is. What's primary in relation to the I. But in all these examples for now, the brain seems to go where the I goes. For now, that seems to be the case. Then imagine a case where we have someone, male psychology, male sex, genetics, everything male. Now, they hypnotize him, and he thinks that he's Lady Diana. Now, the reason I give that example is because there was a patient once, she was female, but she did think she was Lady Diana, and she wanted to be treated like that too. And it was incredible that she had all the details, she knew everything, maybe more than Diana herself, but it was incredible. Now, hypnosis is a reality. I'm saying, let's imagine someone was hypnotized to such an extent that they really thought they were Lady Diana, But it's a male person, sex-wise, gender-wise, and genetics-wise. What if this hypnosis was to arise? This male person, let's just call him Peter for now, the sex remains male, the genetics remains male, the gender alters now, because he thinks he's Lady Diana now. But still, the I doesn't change. The I is the same. Okay, Peter has been abused to be hypnotized like that. And you'd feel sorry for him. And the mother of Peter, with that same Peter who thinks he's Lady Diana, will care for that, for her son. She doesn't see a new individual. It's still her son. The I persists. But we see that gender changes. So even gender is not primary to the I. It's possible for the I to be, but gender can change, like sex and genetics. There was a film a long time ago, I think maybe 20 years ago. It was called Regarding Henry. And it was a businessman. It was based on a true story. A very wealthy businessman who went to the confectionery and then was shot in the head by a thief. And then he forgot everything, and his rational capacity level was that of a 2-year-old. He did survive, but all his memories were gone, and he can now begin to learn. Although he was 40, he had to start learning like a 2-year-old would start learning. And the wife began teaching, was very patient, and this Henry grew up with a totally different character than what he used to be. But this new character and the character before the accident, is the I the same again? Yes. There's no change to the I. The I, yes, was abused, was attacked, was limited in capacity, but it's the same I. The wife was caring for the same I. The parents would care for the same I. Just because they had an accident, it doesn't change. Here again, that thing which remains or seems to remain as a constant is the brain. You want to know where the I goes? You have to see where the brain goes. In all these examples, the brain seems to play an important role. But is it the physical brain per se which is of importance? Or is it the function of the brain which is important? Let's imagine a brain. Very gradually, you keep on replacing one part of the brain with a chip. You keep on replacing it. Eventually it just becomes something robotic. It started as something biological. You can't start with something plastic or electronic. There's no I there. But let's say something. There was an I, and the brain was gradually replaced with chips or whatever you want, electronically. And then all the substance of the brain, the cortex, has now been replaced. You see, that physical brain isn't important. Here, the function of the brain is important here. That's one thing to take. And this function, with the mental processes and everything that the brain does, there's nothing material there. So there seems to be no clear-cut material thing in order to help us to see where the I lies in. And finally, there was another film, more recently, which it was on teleportation or something on those lines. It was called Jumper, where the person, wherever he was, he would vanish and then appear somewhere else. This is not a case of someone moving very fast. No. He would vanish. And then a new set of particles would develop, but it was exactly like that. And this was a film. And then this new entity was in continuity with the previous one before total destruction. Now, this would be problematic now. This hasn't happened in reality, although they say it's happened with subatomic particles and teleportation, that is. But this would be problematic. Here, we would have a problem, at least as Muslims, to accept this. And the reason is that, let's say he does vanish, or the body is totally destroyed. As Muslims, we believe the spirit persists. Now, when you're making the new body, before I explain that, remember, in relation to miracles, Allah Metawatabay in Al-Mizan has said that there's nothing against science in miracles. All miracles undergo the necessary cause and effects in the realm of science. You can't jump or miss a link. The only thing is with miracles, in nature, from A you go to B, you go to C, to D, to F, to G, gradually over a certain period of time. With miracles, this A to B to C to D, all of these arise, but it happens instantaneously. That's the only difference with miracles. Therefore, all the science still is there, all the cause and effects. It has to be. You can't jump a step. So, for example, in the case of the cane of Musa, Nabi Musa alayhi salam, it became a snake. Now, imagine a cane is wood. The wood over time becomes earth. The earth becomes vegetation. A snake comes and consumes the vegetation, for example. What the snake consumes becomes part of his body. The snake procreates with what is eaten. It contributes to the sex cells, for example. Now the snake procreates and gives birth to another snake. Well, it lays eggs rather. So here, all these were natural processes arising, maybe over centuries, or it takes a long time for all this to happen. But there, suddenly, the wooden stick, becomes a snake instantaneously. There's nothing unscientific about it. All the steps had to be there. The only difference is one of time. And time is a whole different subject, but it's something relative. Now, then the snake became a stick. That's also possible for a snake to die and then become part of earth and become wood eventually. But it takes a lot of time, but it becomes instantaneous with miracles. And then that wood became another snake. Later down, did it become the same snake or not? No, we say no. It can't be the same snake. I'll explain why in a minute. Now going back with the individuals. If the body is destroyed, and the same body, same brain, everything is then created, let's say, many kilometers away at the same time, or a bit after. Here we have a problem to say that is the same person. And the problem is this, that when person A, whose body is destroyed, when he dies with the destruction of his body, the soul persists, the spirit persists. Now you're creating a new body. When you're creating the new body, you're saying teleportation, you're creating it all anew very quickly. We don't have a problem with that part. But we believe the science has to be observed. in the science of creation of human beings, it has to go through certain steps. One of those is ensoulment at 4 months. Ensoulment at 4 months is a result of the evolution of the fetus. And then at 4 months, ensoulment arises. A spirit now arises. There was a spirit before. It was vegetative. It wasn't a human spirit. That kept on evolving. At 4 months, it became a human spirit. In quickening, where the child hits the walls of the uterus and so on and so forth, that movement is volitional now. It's not gravitational. It's not a reflex anymore. There is an eye. It's hitting everything around. Albeit the eye rudimentary, but the eye starts at around 4 months. And 4 months isn't the definitive criterion. It may happen before that. But the Sharia came with a clear-cut case that even if quickening doesn't occur, but 4 months has been reached, you have to treat it differently to someone, a fetus before 4 months. It's a human being, but it's a person now. Its blood money is equal to blood money of me and you, if someone were to kill us. Anyway, so when in the creation of that new body, the science has to be observed, namely ensoulment. And now we have 2 spirits. When you have 2 spirits, you can't say they're one. That would be problematic. That we don't accept as being possible. If it is, you can teleport someone, but that new entity, assuming this is to be a reality, which I have no idea, physics isn't my realm, but that would not be regarded, that person's eye wouldn't be regarded as being continuous with the eye of the previous person. And that's why the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the 4 birds, some people have a problem, including Imam Khomeini. He said, look, these 4 birds, are you saying that the revival of the 4 birds, they were physical? Did all this happen in the physical realm? He believes the story happened. He says there's no need to say it happened in the physical realm. And let's say it did happen in the physical realm. Are you saying it was the same 4 birds as before? The very same ones? Or another 4 birds? If you say they were the same 4 birds that were revived, here, with the 4 birds, they were meshed up, the fleshes. And then Nabi Ibrahim was told to go on one mountain top and put a bit of flesh there, another. And then called upon them, then the 4 birds all came back alive. Now, but the fleshes were meshed up. It wasn't as if the birds were killed and the body was intact. The body was totally meshed up, cut into pieces. فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ. Cut them into pieces. Here, we have a problem, because when they were cut into pieces, assuming it all happened in the physical realm, the spirits of the birds still persist. Now you're bringing them back to life from flesh, meshed up. Those meshed up pieces, when they want to be created as a bird, have to go through the scientific cause and effect principles. One step being ensoulment again. And therefore now you have 2 spirits. So they can't be the same birds. However, that's one understanding. We have one tradition though, which is Nabi Ibrahim. He kept the necks of the birds. It's not a Sahih tradition, it's not authentic. But traditions don't have to be fully authentic, transmission-wise, in order to get benefits from them. sometimes when it's on a par with the logic of the Quran, on a par with other traditions, on a par with rationality, it can be accepted. Otherwise, like that, you have to throw away a lot of traditions. And many people may want that. In one tradition, the necks weren't meshed up. The heads of the birds were kept in the hands of Ibrahim alayhi salam. You see, the brain is in the head. The brains were kept intact. And like that, yes, you call upon that person, whatever the body is, whatever steps it goes, it's okay, it's like a transplant with the organs again. But the brain was kept intact. Like that, you can say it was the same birds. That's one way of. Otherwise, if the 4 birds, and you don't accept the tradition on the necks, if the 4 birds in their entirety were meshed up, and then they were called, they can't be the same birds. To be careful here, otherwise we'll be falling into reincarnation here. There are many things that there are many things that we all believe in. Like Alam al-Dhar. It's definite. We believe in it. But the way you explain it, if you don't be careful, you'll fall into reincarnation. All your life you can just shout Alam al-Dhar, but you had a belief of reincarnation because of the way you understood it. Resurrection, Qiyamah, those who believe it's a physical resurrection, I'm not speaking against it, or I don't accept that, but the theologians do. Let's assume it's a physical resurrection. You have to be careful how you explain it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's a position many of our theologians, they hold. That this resurrection is going to be physical. Okay, the Urafah don't accept it. That's for them to sort out. The theologians do. If you do accept the concept of a physical resurrection, you have to sort out this aspect of reincarnation. You have to be careful you don't fall into that trap. In Mullah Sadra's important book on philosophy called Asfar, it's 9 volumes. The last volume, the first 200 pages in volume 9, it's all about this, sorting this question of reincarnation out. And only there you see God grief. Many Muslims, therefore, inadvertently, they accept reincarnation the way they speak, and because of the low degree of research they've put into the articles of doctrine and the articles of faith, what they're believing is on a par with that, even if they don't know it. So these are important matters here. And I've spoken about this in one of my speeches on the Mi'raj. This came up there. We neither have the time nor do I have the energy to go through that debate again. So here we see that so far the eye is something where sex, gender, genetics, materiality has no role to its identity. And we just gave examples in the physical realm. When you go into dreams, when you speak about barzakh and all these things, well, that. But I was trying to speak in a level that you can do with non-believers. But it seems to be immaterial at the end of the day. But the problem is this now. That this essence of ours, that let's say the spirit, okay, it's immaterial, the eye is immaterial. We can, with some effort, try and prove that it is immaterial. But we still say, my spirit. You see, even if the intellect, for example, which is another dimension to us, it's immaterial, you say, my mind, my rationality. Well, let's go back to the my. What's that? That me. So the spirit isn't something which is exactly the I. We want the my bit. We say my spirit, my soul. The spirit is just a manifestation of the I. We want to know what the I is. I'm not here to tell you what it is. I don't know what the eye is either. But once Shahid Mutahari in Qom, when I was watching television, sometimes it shows clips of great scholars. I'm embarrassed to even mention his name, or even try and explain what he was saying. But he said something incredible. It requires audacity. I don't have that. And unfortunately, I don't know from which book it was quoted from. My only reference is Iranian television. But there, when he said this, something else clicked that I had read in the books of Irfan. There was this Arif called Al-Bursi, Rajab Al-Bursi. He said that in the Bible there's a verse where Allah said, and actually I've been to the Vatican and I've put this to them, and they said, no, we don't have such a verse. But Rajab al-Bursi is well known. He gave an Arabic translation to this verse, and it was this, that God said, ظاهرك للفنا. Your outer dimension is to perish. باطنك, your inner dimension, ana, is me. Allah is saying this. This clicked when Shaykh Mutahari said what he said. What did he say? He was saying exactly what we were trying to say. He said, where is this I? Where does our personal identity lie in? What's the essence of us? He passed the rational side, he passed the aql, he said no, and he passed the ruh, and he said our origins is the divine. That's why it's difficult. That's why we don't understand. Unless we become annihilated in him. And that's the whole debate of Qurb al-Fara'id, which we discussed a few nights. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله.